there, this is Pam Perry. Welcome to another episode of Speakers Magazine show podcast. We have an exciting guest today who is an attorney, but also a storyteller, and her name is Deidra Moore. So in 1996, she was a single mother, and then after about 9 years of an employment in Manhattan, she quit her job as a commercial real estate paralegal to attend law school. Then in 1999, upon graduating from law school, she worked as a public defender with the Legal Aid Society in the Bronx. She's out from New York. Then nearly 5 years later, Deidre then left the Legal Aid Society to establish her own firm. And not many attorneys do that. And then in 2004, she established the law offices of Deidra R. Moore. Now, as an African American mother, wife, advocate for change, Deidra, through her vision and her faith, set out a journey in 2020, which is a pivotal year for many African Americans, to educate as many of our youth about the values of investing in themselves and learning about their history. So in 2022, she authored From Me to You, The Power of Storytelling and Its Inherent Generational Wealth, an African American Story. So with that, I bring up Deidra Moore. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Perry.
Oh, thank you for joining us. You know, one of the things that I was reading about, and you said how the book came about, and it had to be with, I believe is it your son or your daughter?
My son.
Your son. Your son was about 8. And he had heard about the Holocaust, the whole situation, and asked you a pivotal question. So tell us a little bit about that story. What happened at that point?
Well, first, Dr. Perry, thank you so much for having me here. I feel so grateful to be here with you. And I so appreciate all that you're doing in showing our younger generations what it looks like to be successful in the realm of finding your passion, following through, creating your own magazine, etc. So thank you for what you do. Okay?
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. One of the things that Speakers Magazine has always been about, we didn't just talk about it, was always about promoting Black speakers. And I think we are the best storytellers on the planet. So I was really excited to hear about your book and, you know, as an attorney, to then go and write a book that is really part of a curriculum during this time when people are talking about critical race theory, right? So anyway, so it all fits together for such a time as this. So tell me.
Okay. Now is the time. So thank you so much. So what happened was, what inspired me to write this book was back in 2019, my son, who was 8 years old then, he had occasion to go on a school trip. And they visited a nursing home here in New York State called the Hebrew Home. And they had occasion to engage a Holocaust survivor. So on the way back to the school bus, my son and his 8-year-old peer started talking to each other. And the peer happened to be of Jewish descent. And they started talking to each other about what their parents and family told them about the Holocaust and slavery. So as my son is sharing with me what they talked about, I became more and more inspired by our youth who are courageously talking about a topic or topics that adults don't even talk to each other about. So as he's sharing with me what they talked about, I was just so inspired, right? So later that evening, as I'm getting him ready for bed, he says to me, so Mom, what's slavery really about? Oh, gosh. I say, oh, gosh, because I thought it was too soon. I thought he had just enough. But I said, okay, well, I gave him some more information and I told him I'll get back to him with some additional stuff over time, right? And so the next day or so, he asked me again, so Mom, so what's slavery really about, right? I said, okay. I started searching my mind. I said, I have to make this a teachable moment for him, right? And so I'm searching my mind and I'm trying to find those resources and ways in which that this story, this complex story about slavery can be narrated in such a way that wasn't so traumatic and traumatizing upon an 8-year-old, particularly 8-year-old Black son, right? So not having found those books particularly that narrated the story the way I wanted to narrate it, I said, I remembered what a dear friend named Edgewood Dotticott told the third graders when she visited the school that year. She says, what what helped her to what started her interest in writing was a quote by Toni Morrison, and the quote went, "If there's a book you want to read but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it." And at that moment, I remembered what she said, and I couldn't find what I wanted to see, have it narrated. So I said, you know what? I'm going to make this a teachable moment. And off went my researching, analyzing, synthesizing, and trying to pull together information about this complex topic of slavery. Right?
Wow.
So that's
And
what
that
inspired me. I'll use.
and that right there is the determination that you have. So starting at the beginning, leaving one particular job, going to law school, and then was it a cakewalk? I mean, like, how many different things did you have to sacrifice while you're going to law school, quitting your job, and then having to fit something in? So how many jobs were you working?
Great question, and thank you so much for that. Because as I share with a lot of people, I did not take the traditional approach to becoming an attorney. So what I did was, after quitting that job of 9 years to go to law school full time, I already had demands as being a single mom, and I needed to maintain those, okay, because it wouldn't be fair to my child at the time to not continue those things because of my selfish desire to want to go to law school. So what I did was I worked 3 jobs. I traversed New York State, whether it's the west side to the east side or other parts of Midtown Manhattan, so that while going to law school full time in a whole other borough, okay.
Oh my God.
But you know what? I cried many nights, but I did it. It was my purpose then. It's what I wanted to do then. And I just kept my eyes on the prize, as our ancestors always tell us to do. If there's something that you want to do, just steadfast, sacrifice, dedication, and discipline, and you will get to the other side of whatever that is. And that's what happened here. So no complaints.
I find that it's real interesting that the background, obviously working in that, and then working in the legal defense fund, now having your own firm and doing law firm and mentoring other young African-American attorneys that want to do that. But then there's this piece about really storytelling and the African-American story, or really American story, really about race, especially today, 2022 and beyond. Anything beyond 2020 is just a whole different feeling now. So tell us what your feelings are about the critical race theory. And has your book, I know it's taught a curriculum in schools, but has there been places where your book has been banned, I guess you would say, from certain places?
Excellent question. 2 points. The first point is, when you mention, or when people speak of critical race theory, for me, this book is not about the theoretical framework that you oftentimes get when you're in academia, like college years, etc. And it's not just talking about the structures that have been put in place to create the disparities of income, healthcare, wealth, everything that it's created a disparity based on race. It's not about that. What this book is about for me, Dr. Perry, is an opportunity to fill what I think and what I see as a gap of where generations and generations of our children, some who are adults as well, never received this information from, forget about school, didn't receive it from home either, for a whole host of reasons. And that is not a negative thing. It's just what it is.
Right.
And I took those skills of analyzing, researching, synthesizing, and pulling this material together the way that I did, because I didn't want any distractions when telling this story. Oftentimes we see in a lot of books, the lynchings and the burnings and all the egregious and torturous and unfortunate things that happened to our ancestors, right? I didn't want anything to distract from the context of this story that we oftentimes don't get. We always get piecemeals. 2nd grade, you get Dr. Martin Luther King. 3rd grade, you get Dr. Martin Luther King Part 2. 4th grade, you get et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to have many of those historical moments going down from exploration, colonization, to the revolution, down to the civil rights movement. I wanted it in one resource.
Yes.
And accessible, so that people would not be distracted and put the book down because of the torturous conduct and egregious conduct that a lot of the enslaved Africans and their descendants were subjected to.
So they can actually see a real good timeline. Absolutely. And not just pulling out pictures of, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, all
Absolutely.
the landmarks. Obviously, those are landmarks in our history, but then
Absolutely.
also for me, it's Emmett Till, and then for for the generations after us, their Emmett Till was George Floyd.
That's
So
right.
you can see all the different pieces, but you haven't. I see what you mean, where you need to tell the story really from the standpoint from the beginning to end. Now, for me,
Mm-hmm.
Deidre, one of the things, and this was probably in high school when Alex Haley did Roots,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, obviously I'm from Detroit, so I go to Detroit public schools. I have African American teachers. I'm an African American. We have a black mayor. I mean, we have so it's like it wasn't like we felt in during the '70s or whatever. We felt really, at least I didn't feel racism. But when I saw Roots for the first time, I really realized, like, oh my God, and I read a little bit in history, but nothing was like seeing all the series of the Roots. I mean, it was just
Right.
like, oh my God. So the thing that you did with your son is like, I'm going to write a book, a teachable moment, that sort of thing. What I did is I actually sat down and had my daughter at about under 10 to
Okay.
watch all of Roots, and her and her friends, they were watching all the Roots, and at the end of it, some of it she was crying and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of it, and she looked at me, and this is what I kind of felt like you. It's like she looked at me and she says, so
Mm.
all of us are descendants of Kunta Kinte.
Mm.
It's like, oh my God, that was not the story I was trying to tell you. I mean, I was like, no, I said, that's just one family documented.
Yeah. But yes, we are all a part of the African diaspora,
Right, right. We're all part of that,
so
but every family has its own
mm,
story. But she
abs-
didn't realize that. And I
and
was
that's
like,
the
yeah,
mhm.
because I didn't know my story.
Right,
I
right.
didn't know my story. We can only, really, I can only go back as far as my great grandmother. So I don't
Yeah.
know that part.
Well,
Yeah.
we didn't know what we didn't know, right? And for me, the triggering point was I was born on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s actual birthday, January
Wow.
15th, right?
Yeah.
So, growing up, he's who I always had between him and my ancestors and my grandmother who raised me, right?
Mhm.
So, I had Dr. Martin Luther King for maybe the first 5 years of my grade school years, but not just him. I was fortunate to be able to have a frame of reference to the stories that he shared and told
Mhm.
in the books that were around during that time for me. So I
Mhm.
kind of got exposed to this story a little earlier than
Right.
others probably would, only because I was born on his birthday,
So
and it
you
was
had
always a special.
the
Yeah,
letter
yeah,
to the
you
Birmingham
know.
jail,
But
and that's probably why maybe you want to be an attorney, maybe just
we'll
one.
get back to that one right there in a minute. But to answer the other part of your question about whether my book has been banned, knock on wood, to date, it has not. But you know what? And this is so crucial. There's 2 points that I point out to folks whenever I get an opportunity to do so. And one is reminding people that, particularly our folks, that we have not come that far, right? Where we can afford to abandon the stories, the journeys, struggles, lessons, dreams, and sacrifices made by our ancestors, right? Right? They were made at a time where they endured so much,
Mhm.
um, the egregious conduct that they were subjected to. We owe them so much more. We can't just throw away their stories or forget their stories or think we made it sufficient enough where we don't have to pass along the legacy of their stories, right? Through
Yeah.
storytelling. The other
Mhm.
thing that I like to point out to people is that, right now our country is divided. We know this, right? Over the issue of upgrading the curricula in schools, right? A curricula that would tell the true story of how enslaved Africans and their descendants pretty much have been abused and used to create that canvas for what we call white privilege, right?
Mhm.
A
Mhm.
curriculum that would share the history of how Black people have consistently been denied opportunities after being exploited so ruthlessly, right? But you know
Mhm.
what? Notwithstanding the fact that people are trying to keep this out of schools, right? Notwithstanding the fact that there's that gap that I referred to where the information hasn't been spoken of in households or schools or wherever. No matter what, leaders, parents, family, friends, aunts, uncles, speakers, everyone, we have an obligation to tell those stories and to tell them anyway.
Yes, we do.
Okay,
We
because
really do.
our kids need to know this history, number one. But number two, we have to remember also that we are going to be at some point the ancestors of our children. So not only are our stories that have been handed down from our prior generations important, but it's important for them to know our stories in current day as well. All the aspirations, why it took me I had to work 3 jobs to go to law school, to put myself through school as a single mom and meeting all the demands. It's important for them to know, because we have sufficient information to draw down from when we need to be inspired, encouraged, empowered, and motivated, because our ancestors did a lot more with a lot less.
And you talked a little bit about Mary McLeod Bethune, and one of the things I think you spoke at the organization, you're a keynote speaker for organization that she founded, but give us a little bit of her story. So I know that she's near and dear to your heart because you talked about her, and a lot of people have heard about her and that sort of thing, but tell us in your words what she means to you.
Thank you so much for asking that question. She's one of my idols, one of many. And yes, I had occasion to be the keynote speaker with the National Council of Negro Women back in February of this year during Black History Month, I believe it was. And I was so honored to have been asked to do that, right? And she was born in 1875. And what a lot of folks probably don't realize is that in 1904, if I do my math right, she was about 26 or 29 years old, and she created a school for Black children.
That's amazing.
At 29 or even 26 years old.
I can't imagine. My daughter's 26. I can't imagine.
And she did it during the Jim Crow era. All right. Not only that, in 1935, if I did my math correctly, again, she would be about 60 years old, and she created the National Council of
Negro Women.
I get a little excited when I talk about it.
National Council of Negro Women.
National Council of Negro Women at 60 years old during this Jim Crow period. So how can we not do a lot of the things that we have opportunities to do, like trying to make the change that we need to make right now, trying to talk about things that
reparations.
Absolutely. That's a whole nother dialogue. That 40 acres and a mule.
Yes.
Let's have a conversation about that.
Right.
And so while I'm so happy to hear that there's a lot of organizations, when I say a lot, more than what there have been, that are actually talking about and bringing to the forefront issues surrounding reparations. And so I'm actually looking to be a part of another organization that is deeply rooted in trying to address and bring that to the forefront.
Wow.
So
that's one of the ones where a client of mine, Nikichi Taifa, and she's been on the forefront for HR 40 for over about 40 years. John Conyers from Detroit was one of the ones that introduced that, particular legislation. He passed before it. But anyway, it's making headway.
Yes, it is.
And it's one of the things where generations like Nikichi said that when she was in grade school, she heard a story about the Black Panthers and how they were treated unfairly and that sort of thing. And that gave her the spark to want to be an attorney and then on the road. And so you have something too that probably sparked you, besides being born on MLK's birthday, something that sparked in you that said, I want to be an attorney. I want to do this type of work. What was that one pivotal part of your journey that said, I need to go to law school and I need to do some things?
Well, thank you for that question. I've always wanted to be a judge. Growing up, I didn't have attorneys in my neighborhood, in my community, in my building. I didn't have access to them. I didn't know about attorneys, quite frankly, and what they did, nor did I know about being or how to become a judge. What happened was I was about maybe 11 years old, I want to say. My grandmother always called me an old soul. All right, let's start there. But I was about 11 years old. And let's say I had 2 friends, right? So there's 3 of us. 2 of the friends were not speaking to each other, right? And when they're not speaking to each other, they would turn and expect me not to speak to that other person, right? So you have A, B, and C, and I'm C. So A wouldn't talk to B, and I'm not supposed to talk to B, and C wouldn't talk to A, and I'm not supposed to speak to her either. So what I oftentimes did in a lot of scenarios, I would speak to A and B separately, trying to get an understanding as to why they're not speaking to each other, right? And then I would, on another occasion, bring A and B into the same space and explain to them, it looks like this was a misunderstanding, me a little 11, 12-year-old misunderstanding, right?
Right.
That's the old soul in me, right? Old soul. And so what happened was they realized it was a misunderstanding and we're all friends again. So that to me was when I did jury duty, when I turned 18 or 21, my first bout with jury duty was when I made the connection, quite frankly, of, oh my gosh, I've been playing this role for some time now, because in that scenario of A, B, and C, I was an attorney trying to, put forth the position of
Navigate.
whomever, and I was playing judge trying to be neutral to hear both sides of the story so I can see which way, what's the best resolution, so to speak. So that was a triggering time for me when I said, when it developed in my mind that I wanted to go to law school, become an attorney, because I realized that you had to become an attorney before you became a judge.
So
You know,
that's the next phase. Then
that's
there's
what,
a client of mine. I would love you to meet. Her name is Judge Leanya Lloyd,
okay,
and she became a judge. Her and her twin sisters were the first African American twins to sit on the
nice.
same. But it is a whole nother journey because they were an attorney and they had their own practice, and then they had to go run for you got to run for judge, right? So
Oh,
that's
that
a
whole
whole
political thing,
that whole
I
that
can
whole
write a book
political
on
thing.
that.
Yes, yes. But I would like to introduce you to her. She was
Okay.
actually on the Speakers Magazine show
Oh,
as well.
great.
So it's funny how a lot of the guests are all synergy. They
Connected.
all have a synergy. They all have the passion to
Yeah.
really. They know their purpose.
Yeah.
You know who it is that you're called to. You all want to speak about it, and you're speaking on stages about it,
Yeah.
getting your books out, sharing that message, and regardless of what is going on in the world, you're just marching forward.
That's right.
Because there's so. I mean, listen, you're running a law firm. You could just be good with that, but now you're writing books and speaking. So that's a
Absolutely.
whole nother thing, right? That's a whole nother
Absolutely.
and raising kids that, obviously they're probably part of the business as well. It's like the part that you talked about, the generational wealth. So
Yes.
what does that part of, because we talk about the power of storytelling, and then you also talk about inherent generational wealth. So is the wealth like financial wealth, or we're talking about wealth of knowledge?
We're talking about wealth of knowledge. It's
Okay.
not about financial wealth. And in fact, this the generational wealth that our children will be afforded when they hear these stories of our ancestors, people like Mary McLeod Bethune, Marcus Garvey, and Fannie Lou Hamer. When they hear Fannie Lou Hamer saying back when, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, her being a civil rights activist and a voting rights activist, and we're still saying this stuff today. And they'll see how the stories of our ancestors and their lived experience have shaped our lives today and have
Mhm.
gotten us to the place today where we can be lawyers, presenters, speakers, doctors, whatever it is. I think the generational wealth for me is that wealth of knowledge that they
Yeah.
get. And not only that, but that identity and self-worth that
Yeah.
comes with it, right? And let me
Mhm.
just say one more thing to that identity and self-worth, if I may. Okay, identity and self-worth to me is not about confidence and self-esteem. All right, it's not, because those two words, confidence and self-esteem, are gauged by who you're in the room with, right? They make you feel confident or make you have low self-esteem, or you do it to yourself, whichever it is, right? But that identity and self-worth, when you walk into any room, I want
Mhm.
our child, our children, to be able to navigate the spaces having full knowledge of themselves, meeting them where
Mhm.
they are. Okay, whatever they know that all those messages that they're going to be getting and receiving, they're going to be able to repel it because they have a sense of identity and self-worth.
Of
I don't
course.
want them to turn 18 years old and then get kicked into the world of trying to work in government, corporate, or wherever they might be working, or become employed, to have to navigate our imperfect terrain here, and not have a sense of identity or self-worth in doing so. I want
That's
them to
one of your
get it
main
as early as possible.
Yeah, that's one of the things that you talked about, identity and self-worth, really knowing who you are, where you came from, and the worth is from knowing that your lineage is brilliant, that it's powerful, that it didn't just start with slavery, right? We go back
Absolutely.
before that, like, so
Absolutely.
we can actually know where the self-worth is because you know who you are. And
Absolutely.
you were talking about how it was the pivotal point where your son was listening to in the nursing home from a Jewish lady, and they knew their history about their Jewish history and the Holocaust and all that, and they're passing those stories down. They're never really forgetting it,
Yeah,
and that was where their self-worth and identity comes from. That's a very cohesive group. The Jewish people are
absolutely.
very proud and cohesive group, but their history wasn't ripped up away from them.
Right,
Obviously, we've got to dig a little bit further. We got to write more book. We got to tell the
right.
stories, and that's what
Absolutely.
your book is really doing. It's helping people tell the stories. One
Okay.
last question.
Sure.
So, um, I know the pivotal point about when you were going to write the book. So, what is next on the horizon for you? You've got the book. Is there another book? Is there how old is your daughter now? Is she old enough to really like take over the business now and doing your speaking business?
Okay.
What's next on the horizon?
Okay. Well, first I'll say this: my daughter is a all of a full adult, and our son is 10. He'll be 11 next month. And
Okay.
so, while she lives in another state,
Uh,
being the adult she needs to be,
mhm.
I love her dearly. And if law is not her passion or her thing, that's fine.
Right,
It's
right.
it's about finding what makes you happy, what drives you,
Mhm,
and what your purpose is. I like to
mhm.
say finding your VIP status. What's your voice? Find your voice, your identity, and purpose, and go out there and use it, whatever
Ooh, I
that might
love
be.
that.
Right.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry, I digressed. I apologize. Um, there was a point I wanted to make. What was that question again? Before.
Well, so basically, like, what's next? I'm thinking,
Oh,
like, if your daughter is an adult
yeah.
and you have your speaking business, right?
Mhm.
She can maybe like book you, or she can kind of do some of the things, that kind of thing is what I was thinking. Like, just looking at like legacy businesses, because like she doesn't have to be law fine, but she can, whatever part she is, if you're the brand, you are the brand. Deidre Moore is the brand, deidremoore.com, right? So she can
Yes.
help with that, even if it's just to do the social media for you or whatever.
If she chooses to be a part of, I'm all about raising children to grow and go. Go
Mhm,
meaning go out there in the world and find out what it is that drives you. This is my passion. It doesn't have to be yours. I'm
mhm.
just busy creating what I like to think is generational and legacy wealth for my
Yeah,
family.
yeah.
What you do with it when I move on and become your ancestor is up to you guys. I would seek pleasure in knowing that you're doing what it is that you enjoy doing. It doesn't have to be what I want you to do.
Mhm. I love
Right.
that.
That's
I love that.
the other thing is, why do I keep going away from that question that you asked?
Well, Black History Month is coming up. You're gonna be booked
Oh
and
wait,
busy. So
I,
that
I
I
got it.
know. And
I
then
got
your books are being taught in schools.
Yes, I actually wanted to say thank you to one of the schools who is an independent school here in New York State that has informed that they've changed the grade 5 curriculum to include From Me to You as one of the resources.
Wow.
And I could not be more honored to
Yes.
know that they did that. And I have another public school here in New York State who purchased a bulk of the books and they gave them out to the children. And I was able to go on a Zoom and meet them and speak with them about the book.
Wow.
Right.
That does not happen often. Let me
So,
just
yeah,
tell
so,
you.
so I
That is
feel blessed and
yes,
grateful.
yes. That is the culture of schools, for one thing, to take on a new author, right?
Yeah.
You're a brand new
Mhm.
author, and to teach that is really, really major. So I could see it really going more national. I mean, Detroit, we've got schools here,
Yeah.
and it definitely is needed here. So we need to definitely make sure that your book goes in the places where it needs to go. And they can go and get bulk copies at djmoore.com.
Absolutely. DeidreMoore.com or my publisher's website, which is mascotbooks.com, MASCOTBOOKS.com. It's at Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, Ingram and Baker, um, um, uh, the Lit Bar apparently is on Target. I heard someone say it's like
Okay.
it's
Yes.
being widespread. So I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I do have a coloring and activity book that we're working on
Okay.
getting out hopefully before the end of the year,
That'd
and
be
an associated book to go with that. And the coloring and activity book, I love that because the Library of Congress put out some images of the prominent 19th and 20th century civil rights activists. And I said, okay, let me print them out. And they were in black and white. But how can I make this a teachable moment for the kids, right?
Mhm.
So I did word searches for each one of them. I created my publisher, I'm sorry, my illustrator created illustrations or images that can be colored in for each one of them. And they have quotes and affirmations and a host of information to give that
Oh,
knowledge again about our ancestors and the spirit in which they lived and the
I
things that they did.
love
So
that.
thank you
Oh
for
my,
asking about that.
oh
And
my
yes, Black
God.
History Month is coming up, and I expect that there will be more opportunities because it hasn't stopped since February of 2022.
Right.
Even before the book was released. And I so appreciate the opportunity to come out and share it and get it in the hands of as many of our young generations or
Mhm.
anyone who might embrace it. So
Yeah, it
thank you for
doesn't
this
necessarily
opportunity.
have to be like young, even though that's where they're being taught, but anyone can actually have the book and learn something from it. And there is a organization in Detroit. I'd like to invite you to look it up. It's Twisted Storytellers, and it's
Okay.
sort of a cross between Satori Shakur is over that, and she has been in Speakers Magazine as well. It's the Speakers Magazine. You're part of the family now.
I
But
appreciate
she has this thing that she does at the African American Museum. I think now it's at Marygrove because of some water damage. But it's like she does twisted storytellers, and basically it's African American storytellers. That's
nice,
what she's a
nice.
great story. And so I would love for you to get in touch with her, possibly come to Detroit
Oh,
and do a
yes,
story. It's like a
yes.
TED talk, but it's like 15 minutes, and they actually have them on NPR as well, as a podcast and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's
Awesome.
she's been doing it probably for at least 10 years.
Oh,
At
God
least 10
bless.
years.
I love it.
And she is really that part where you were saying storytelling changes
Yeah,
lives. It
yeah.
really does. Storytelling changes lives. And she talks about the power of story, and you would really love her. Name is Satori Shakur, and it's just amazing.
I
It's
look
just
forward to
amazing.
meeting her.
Yes, the power of stories. That's really it. So we've got a lot of people we got to get you to meet
I
and,
appreciate it.
your next phase of doing everything that you need to be doing. But I just appreciate you coming on. DeidraMoore.com. It's that's her name.com is where you find everything that you need to, how to book her, how to get the books, how to get the books
Yes,
in bulk, all of those, all the things, right? All the
yes,
things. So
yes.
and actually obviously get it from probably traditional bookstores as well if you don't want to go online and that sort of thing. So
Yes, you can.
yes,
Thank
yes.
you
So
so
what
much for that.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I
I am
appreciate
Pam.
you.
All right, I'm Pam Perry, and make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And we are done for today. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.